And I'll go ahead and turn it over to Rebekah.
Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. As Jenny mentioned, my name is Rebekah Angona. I hold the dual roles of Director of Education at San Diego Audubon, as well as a resident manager. So I'll be kicking us off today and then turning it over to Phil to discuss the Silverwood Wildlife Sanctuary. So I am going to share my screen so you don't have to stare at me and you can at least look at some of our photos. So give me just one moment while I get that going. All right. And can we all see my screen okay?
Yeah, looks great.
Okay, so tonight we are discussing the Anstine-Audubon Nature Preserve and the Silverwood Wildlife Sanctuary by preserving San Diego habitats through education, outreach, and science. So an outline of today's presentation, I'll be kicking us off to discuss just a general introduction to San Diego Audubon if you're not familiar with our chapter. And then I'll be going over Anstine, including the history, programs, challenges, and future projects. Turning it over to Phil to discuss those same topics for Silverwood. And then we'll come back together and discuss ways to get involved with our chapter, as well as going over any questions that you have for us at the end. So San Diego Audubon's mission statement is to foster the protection and appreciation of birds, other wildlife, and their habitats through education and conservation efforts. We do this by shaping a culture in San Diego where nature is a common interest for all. We know we have a lot of avid birders here in San Diego, but that's not the only community that we're looking to engage with our chapter. We want to bring everyone to feel comfortable about being in nature, recognizing the mental and physical benefits of being in nature, and just getting their hands dirty and coming out and recognizing the biodiversity that we have within our county. So the history of San Diego Audubon, as one of Vista Audubon is, we are also a chapter of National. Our particular chapter was founded in 1948. It was initially a volunteer-run chapter, but we have grown quite a bit since then. The numbers I have in front of you, I swear they change on a daily basis. We have a few new open positions, so those numbers will change over the next week or so. But we have about 10 full-time staff positions, 15 part-time, 14 board members, and over 800 volunteers to help us with our efforts. Our office is pretty centrally located just on Morena Boulevard in the Bayho Mission Bay area. But when I discuss our office, I say it's boring. You come in, you see a couple of office spaces because all of our work is in the field. So we are working throughout San Diego County, as well as in the Salton Sea region and Imperial. Our programs, which I'll discuss coming up, include conservation, education, outreach, and of course, our sanctuaries. So our conservation department really focuses at this point on a lot of coastal work with endangered species and habitat management. Some of our key species that we focus on are California least terns, snowy plovers, ridgeways rail, and nuttall lotus. So we're kind of working to make sure that those species are protected as well as the habitat that they're residing in. Another big initiative that we've been a part of since 2018 is our Rewild Mission Bay project that is working with the city of San Diego to hopefully restore the northeastern portion of Mission Bay to the wildest option. This is an area that they are looking, moving the camplands areas, Deanza Point, and looking at what we can do with that space. And we're trying to push our initiative to say that don't forget about wildlife, don't forget about sea level change, don't forget about all of these things that are coming our way, and maintaining that space for habitat for wildlife. We also like to engage the public in coming out and getting their hands dirty. We partner with UC San Diego at the Kendall Frost Marsh during our Wander the Wetlands days. We have special events throughout the year where we're bringing the public into that typically restricted space. But our Wander the Wetlands on Saturdays twice a month, we can bring the public out with docent-led tours and really get them to understand the importance of that region. And if you can see my cursor, I'm circling it right here, the Kendall Frost region here in Mission Bay. We also have some really great projects going on throughout the county for our native seed library, partnering with California Native Plant Society. So if you've ever walked through your town and seen the little library set up with books where you can take a book, leave a book, we're kind of working off of that concept. We've created native seed libraries where we collect native seeds either from our properties or throughout San Diego, package them, and then distribute those for free to the community so that they can help develop native gardens all throughout San Diego. Our education programs are also spread all throughout the county. We have our 2 sanctuary programs, our Anstine Adventures program, which works with the 3rd graders from Vista Unified School Districts, where they come out to the Anstine Preserve for 3 consecutive weeks for field trips to learn about the native habitats, flora and fauna that we have here in North County. And then we work with the 4th graders from Lakeside School District for our Silverwood Science Discovery program, where they get in-class and field trips out to our Silverwood Sanctuary to learn about chaparral habitats. Our Outdoor Explorer program focuses in the Chula Vista region. We work with the after-school providers at Chula Vista schools, bringing our students out for 4 weeks of field trips to the Otay River Valley Regional Park. And then Sharing Our Shores is kind of a blossoming program that's moved all throughout the county. We have programs that focus down in Imperial Beach, Mission Bay, and we've actually partnered with Vista Audubon to bring this program up to Oceanside schools, where the students focus on either rare or threatened species, bird species. They get in-class programming as well as field trips and create conservation-themed posters that are installed at our area beaches or bays to educate the public on how they can protect local and migratory birds. Our outreach, probably the biggest one that most people have heard of, is our San Diego Bird Festival, which this year will be running February 22nd to 26th. It's based out of Mission Bay for our workshops, but we have field trips all throughout the county that you can participate in during those days. Registration has opened, so if you're interested, you can just look up San Diego Bird Festival. And that is a wonderful opportunity to meet speakers from all throughout the country, as well as birders from all around the country that come here for that special event. We offer workshops and courses. So our Beginning Birders course has been a real success, where we have both digital components where, we'll do Zoom meetings, and then field components for our birders who really, again, that's kind of that opportunity for new people to come into the Audubon Club and just, feel a little bit more comfortable being out in nature and having accessible way of learning the local species that we have here in our county. Our Audubon Advocates program is with our conservation department, where we're working with volunteers to really get the word out on local issues that are occurring. So they kind of take on a project that they want to do over a few months period, and they're writing letters, getting a lot of publicity, news centered around specific issues, and obviously writing letters to legislation. The newest one that we have coming out for our outreach is our San Diego Rivermouth Docent Program. So that's where we'll be bringing out more docents, more people in the public to get the word spread about all our amazing species, as well as ways that people can participate in nature. And of course, our wildlife sanctuaries, which we'll be getting into a lot more detail on later, but San Diego Audubon does own and operate 2 wildlife sanctuaries, our Silverwood Wildlife Sanctuary located in Lakeside, and our Anstine-Audubon Nature Preserve in Vista. So our sanctuaries really support San Diego Audubon's mission by first and foremost, providing protected land for bird and other wildlife. Sometimes people ask us, well, why aren't you open 7 days a week to the public? Well, the number one thing that we are trying to do is preserve land for wildlife. Of course, we want people to come and fall in love as well, but we need to make sure that we're preserving those spaces for both our local and migratory animals. So combined, we have nearly 800 acres of chaparral, coastal sage scrub, and riparian habitats. And as we know in San Diego with urban sprawl, it's extremely important to make sure that we have that preserved land, knowing going forward that that will be protected space, whether they're wildlife corridors or just, simple stopovers for our wildlife to survive. Our sanctuaries also provide scientific research opportunities. So we're partnering with colleges, universities, researchers in the area and from afar that are looking for either preserved habitat. Silverwood is a wonderful example of fire restoration. So, what happens after a fire. So there's a lot of opportunities for research on our properties. And then, of course, public outreach and community engagement. We want the public to come, know that we are free, to visit. We're in their community. We want people to fall in love with nature right around them and know that it's accessible for all. So we do this through our education programs, workshops, public visiting hours, and restoration work parties. So that's kind of a brief overview of San Diego Audubon. At this point, I'm going to jump into our Anstine-Audubon Nature Preserve. And this is the preserve that I've managed for the past 5 years. I've been with Audubon for almost 10 years now and have been at the preserve for the past 5 and absolutely have fallen in love with it. There is our address on Hutchison Street. It's kind of an interesting location. A lot of people don't know what we are or who we are, so we're really trying to spread the word about the availability for people to come and visit. So if you're familiar with the Vista Oceanside Bonsall area, we're right kind of in that corner we're similarly close to Wahome Park as we are Gopher Canyon off of the 15. So we are currently open from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. on Saturdays. We do have a Wednesday a month where we're open to our members and a little bit earlier so that people can come out for birding, October through June, closed during those hot summer months and the heavy fire season. So at the Anstine-Audubon Nature Preserve, we are a modest 11.6 acre preserve, but within that small space, it's kind of very unique because we have 4 distinct habitats. So we have old growth oak woodlands, which is in this portion of our property here. Coastal sage scrub. There's 2 portions of the property that host coastal sage scrub, which is a endangered habitat here in California. So we have our restored coastal sage scrub, which I'll discuss in a moment. And then our northern portion of our property, which is really neat. It's hillside, a lot more sun access. So you're going to see a lot more cactus, prickly pear, cholla, and it's really interesting to be able to compare the 2 spaces within only a few acres of different geography. We do have a pond. It is a man-made pond. I'll discuss why that occurred, but it is about an 1.5 acre man-made pond that hosts a lot of waterfowl and shorebird species. And then we have a riparian forest. So we do have a year-round stream coming in the preserve. This area comes in your, jumped ahead one. And of course it's going to freeze. Okay, there it is. The preserve does have a year-round creek that comes in to replenish the pond, and the stream does go out. I typically say that it's a year-round stream going out. Unfortunately, this past year, because of our drought, was the first time in 6 years that I have seen the creek dry. But since the past rains, what was that, last week or a week prior, our stream is finally flowing and happy again. So the Anstine property came to San Diego Audubon through the Anstine family. John and Lois Anstine owned this property. Initially, it was a vacation home for them. When they retired, they moved on to the premises and lived here until their older age, when they were starting to look for an organization that would be interested in taking it over and preserving it for wildlife. So they came to, I believe, Vista Audubon too, and then San Diego Audubon to see if they were interested in acquiring this property. And we took it on in 1999 and then began ownership in 2000. And when we acquired the property, the Anstines didn't necessarily have it as native habitat, as you can see in the background here. A lot of palm trees, a lot of different grasses. They had a lot of farming and ranch equipment. They had orchards and flower beds in the region. So our restoration began in about 2003, and that's where the first was just general cleanup of the property, removing some of, just the excess that was left over from the years. And then we started delving into the actual restoration of the plants. At that point, the Anstines had built the pond. They hired in AmeriCorps to dredge the stream out to the 1.5 acre pond, and they used that for irrigation for their orchards. So when we acquired the property, then now you can see here, the pond was actually taken over again by the cattails. So there was a very large dredging process that needed to occur to reacquire this space. All above it is cattails and tule, this whole area in here. And then this was the pond. So we brought it back to what the Anstines had at that 1.5 acres. And as you can see, the cattails, you can just walk right out into the pond. They were overhead and had taken over completely, along with quite a bit of poison oak in the space. And then a dredging process occurred. So to remove those cattails and also the base of the pond. And a long process moved it over to what I was mentioning before as the restored coastal sage scrub space. So all that nice clay material.
It's all cattails and stuff. They brought in a big,
was able
I
to
don't know, long-armed.
they were able to kind of come in and start our restoration process from scratch. So through the work of volunteers in our committee, most of the plants around the area were replanted to native species, as you can see here. A bridge was built as well as a dam. So that's what I was talking about when the stream had dried up this past year. We do have a very shallow dam to maintain water within the pond. But this also connected the north and the south section of the property so that we could build trails on the whole northern region. So within our habitat here, again, we do have the coastal sage scrub. It is a wonderful space. I love it because throughout the year, you will always find wildflowers blooming. So a lot of those are our sages, monkey flowers, deerweed, and then again, in the northern portion, you're going to see a lot more of the prickly pears, and we have a very wonderful pollinator garden full of milkweed and lovely monarch butterflies. Some of the birds that we have, it's a lot of our common species you'll find here. We have, I call resident red-tailed hawks, almost at 2 o'clock every day. They're flying overhead and can be guaranteed to be seen. We have quite a few of our migratory birds coming through, but we're best known for people interested in seeing Phenopepala. They come from all over to make sure that they can find them here at the preserve. And then obviously we do have our pond, so it's really exciting. I'm extremely happy to report that this morning at 6 a.m. I walked out to the pond and we had a pair of hooded mergansers that have joined us. So they are here. They've been here every year since I've been at Audubon, and they are joining us again this year. So some of the threats that we face here. So our preserve, it's pretty small in this little space here, but I wanted to show you this larger picture to focus on what we're up against in the community. As you notice here is Wahome Park, the 76, and then over here will be the 15. So we are 11.5 acres surrounded by residential space. So of course we're dealing with, just having houses around us and the influence that that encounters, but also we are dealing with the threats that we have, not only San Luis Rey River right next to us, but a lot of agricultural space as well. So our runoff here at the preserve comes from farmlands, horses, and just regular debris coming off the highway and the roads around us. Even close by here, Hutchison Street, unfortunately, is a street that kind of combines Vista and Oceanside. So it's a very fast-paced road, and our creek right here is our pond, and our creek runs right along Hutchison. So we are constantly pulling out debris, trying to remove that from the creek so that it doesn't affect the habitat and wildlife in that region. We've had to install fencing. When I first moved in at the preserve, I was pulling mattresses, grills, paint, toxic waste, all out of this region. And luckily through a SANDAG grant, we were able to install a 5-foot fence along our Hutchison Street. And that has really removed some of that green waste that was being thrown in, as well as people just throwing things off the back of their truck, because that is a very sensitive habitat in that region. It's also a very busy road, so we do have threats from, unfortunately, cigarettes, people throw out their window, as well as people not slowing down on our S-curve and driving right through our fencing. We had about a 1/4-acre fire a few years ago. So whereas Phil's going to be talking about fire threats in more of a wild, wild space approach, ours is much more human impact from directly off the road. And a few years ago, we were part of the lilac fire that ran down the San Luis Rey River. And that came within about a mile of the preserve. So there's always wildfire threats in our region as well. And then you can never get away from invasive species. As much as we're doing to eradicate them, again, we have a lot of influence from the residentials around us. So working on removing those invasives along our boundaries of the preserve. So the future, it's a wonderful preserve. We're getting our name out with the community. I know you may be thinking we've had it for 22 years, but really we hadn't started bringing in the public until about 2013. An education program started in about 2015. So it's relatively new on really engaging a lot of people throughout San Diego to come to the preserve. So we're always looking to continue to expand our educational opportunities with both youth and families. We're also really excited to restore a whole new northern portion of the property. We have a few grants coming in this year to put in new native plants, a new watering system, fire-resistant plant signage, and an overlook on a whole new section of the preserve. And then we're always looking for additional support from volunteer programs. So for the past 2 years, Phil and I have been sharing some California Climate Action Corps fellows who have been helping us with fire fuel reduction and maintaining defensible space around our structures. So they've been a huge asset, tons of hours to get this work done at our preserve. Okay, at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Phil, who's going to discuss our Silverwood Wildlife Sanctuary.
All right, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
You got it. Sounds good, Phil.
Sounds good.
Okay. I keep getting a little pop-up that my internet's unstable, so I don't know how long this is going to last. All right, so Silverwood Wildlife Sanctuary. Silverwood is 785 acres. We're in the East County of Lakeside. We border the Barona Reservation to the north and the El Capitan Open Space Preserve to the south. Our elevation ranges from 1,500 feet to 3,100 feet. And you can see from this image, we have very pristine, isolated riparian forests. Silverwood is mostly mixed chaparral based on the fact we have coastal and montane species of shrubs like big berry manzanita to mission manzanita. I just want to point out some of the threats here. You can see all the development bordering our boundary line in purple. It seems that everybody that decides to build along our property line, mainly because of the threat of fire, the one thing that developers and residents do is they basically just bulldoze every native living shrub on their property. And that encourages more invasive populations to start up and encroach Silverwood. So to the left is the western portion of Silverwood where our hiking trails are. And heading east, Silverwood runs over what's called the Silver Dome. It's kind of in the middle of the boundary. It's the largest full granitic monolith in all of Southern California. So it's a great geological feature for geology students. And then towards the east is what's called the Wiedenhof Summit that the peak is at 3,100 feet. So moving on. Next. You can go to the next slide. Silverwood originally was owned by a family called the Woodwards. Yeah, go back one. There you go. So the Woodward had 128 acres. They called it the property the Woodward Hills Wildlife Sanctuary. It was used for Christian camps and other groups. The Woodwards also had invited San Diego Audubon members to come do birding in their observation area, where you can see on the right, Harry Woodward with all the chairs. And in 1965, they decided to offer the property as a donation to the San Diego Audubon Society, which they gladly accepted. And since then, the organization has been raising donations and purchasing adjoining parcels. Since 2016, we have added, let's see, another 78 acres to the sanctuary. Next slide. What happened to Frank Gander? No, go ahead and go back. Yeah. Frank Gander was the first manager at Silverwood. He was the curator for the botany department at the San Diego Natural History Museum, and started living at Silverwood and managing it in 1966. He began doing education programs with inner city schools, and in, I think it was 1970, he had over 2,000 students that had visited the Silverwood Wildlife Sanctuary. He also recorded as many species of plants, birds, and reptiles during his 10-year reign here. So we have a pretty extensive database of species that exist here at Silverwood. Yeah, let's go on to the next one. let's go to the, yeah. Now Silverwood consists of mainly the mixed chaparral habitat. But we also have microhabitats. We have that pristine riparian oak forest. We also have, next slide. Next slide. Next slide.
You're
There
on
you
mixed
go.
chaparral.
So here you can see the, I can't, can you hear me? Okay. Oh, there goes the internet. Hold on. So here you can see the images of the chaparral in full bloom with the ceanothuses. We have 6 species of ceanothus here at Silverwood. The image showing the purple flowers is actually the hairy leaf ceanothus. And below are the native annuals that exist here at Silverwood in the spring. So, next slide. Uh-oh. So here you can see one of the microhabitats. We also have what's called a cienega. It's a seasonal wetland. It gets saturated during heavy rainy season. So a lot of the native chaparral shrubs that are considered arid soil loving shrubs will get root rot and die. So this kind of stays open as a seasonal meadow, but it does sustain a lot of native species of wildflowers, which took years to get it to this after spending about 10 years eradicating mustards and thistles and grasses. So you can see a lot of the guatatus monkey flowers. There's also the blue-eyed grasses, clarkias, and conchalaguas. So next slide. Next slide. There you go. Out on the tops of the ridges are what are called successional islands that exist on the exposed granitic slab surfaces, which house a lot of species of pioneer species of plants and bryophytes. You can see the lady's finger dudleyias and the shooting stars. We are still recording a lot of species that are recovering since the cedar fire. This last week, I just recorded a new recovering species, a soil lichen. It's a Clandonia species. So we'll be working with the San Diego Natural History Museum to start bringing in specimens of those. Next slide. So the hiking trails for the general public and for our education programs, we have 5.7 miles of hiking trail. We've got some beautiful vista points where in some locations along the ridge, you can actually see the San Jacinto Mountain during the winter and San Antonio up out of Riverside, and all of the coast with the islands off of Coronado. So you get a 360-degree panoramic view of a lot of San Diego County. Next slide. So to date, we now have 130 species of seasonal and residential birds. Some of the birds that came in after the Cedar Fire were recorded and deemed fire following species based on the annual and perennial fire falling flowers that come in and attract insects. So, but we do have resident, great horned owls. You can see the screech owl that's been living here for about 10 years now. Next slide. So a lot of these species can be seen in our birding observation area where we do have bird feeders and bird baths. Our mammal population is pretty extensive. You can see all these photos of the resident bobcat and coyote, and our population of mule deer that live here, and our resident gray foxes. We did record a mountain lion here a couple of summers ago that did eat a deer along the driveway in 2020. Now, a lot of the mammals that we keep up to date on what still exists here, unfortunately, are recorded as roadkill along the frontage of the Silverwood property on Wildcat Canyon Road. We do have a hide of a ringtail cat and a weasel that got killed a few years ago, and a spotted skunk. So that's one way we determine what species are still existing in this habitat here. Next slide. So here you can see some of the reptiles. Frank did record with asterisks a lot of species of reptiles, especially snakes, that this was a range and habitat, but they hadn't been recorded here yet. But after the Cedar Fire, a lot of the seasonal rains created or allowed the streams to flow through into summer. So there was a lot of amphibian breeding and a lot of baby Pacific tree frogs and western toads, which attracted a lot of these species of snakes to actually come out and be observed. So the recent species were the patch-nosed snake, the lyre snake, and the night snake. So those are recent confirmation species that have been added to Silverwood. Next. Well, yeah, here's our Silverwood flora. Now, Frank started recording as soon as he got here in 1966, but the Natural History Museum's database records for the plant atlas squares out in this area, the N15, the N16, and N14, show that he'd been collecting specimens all the way back from 1927. So once he passed away here at Silverwood in 1976, his data was compiled in 1978 by Howie Weir and became the first Silverwood plant list, which consisted of 274 species of shrubs and annuals, along with some non-native species. But after the cedar fire, we began recording new species that had never been recorded here at Silverwood, like the golden eardrop poppies and the slimy monkey flowers. And these are species of fire followers that do come out for up to 4 years after a fire. Each season they produce seeds for the next seed bank. And then as the chaparral shrubs begin their dominance, they all disappear. So Frank had never seen a golden eardrop poppy here at Silverwood. And then after the fire, a lot of the landscape out here was just dominated by these yellow flowering poppies. But once the chaparral does return, or the chaparral shrubs, they disappear and wait for the next fire to activate their seeds. So now a lot of our work in the last about 15 years has been working on the eradication of very dense populations of invasive grass, black mustard, star thistle, Italian thistles. And as we've been eradicating these populations, without doing restoration, eventually native annuals do start to come back. So over the years, it's every year we get to record new species coming back into these sites. Silverwood is now up to 79 species. Unfortunately, 108 of those are non-native species. And so those are the species that we're working on eradicating. We actually have succeeded in removing most of the black mustard on the Silverwood Wildlife Sanctuary, and other species like castor bean and tree tobacco. They're no longer seen here. I started recording the bryophytes, the liverworts, the ferns. So we're starting to get a list of those. Just in this year alone, we've added 4 new species to the list. They've been turned into the museum. The Salvia reflexa is actually a non-indigenous species of annual mint. That is a first recording of that species for the county. We also recorded a species of grass, a Stipa comata, and that was the first recording of that species for San Diego County. And this Salvia palmeri, this is a hybrid species of sage. It's a hybrid between a white sage and a Cleveland sage. All right, next. Next.
You're on insects.
So yeah, go ahead and move to the next slide.
You should be on insects now, Phil.
There it is. So we haven't updated our entomology list yet, but I've been adding new recordings. So we'll eventually be publishing that, working with the Natural History Museum and a volunteer who's been coming out and recording species of spiders. But on the a couple of new species on the left is what's called a dragon looper grasshopper. And then the one on the finger is a species of darkling beetle that's been recently recorded. So next. Yeah, I've got a major delay. The internet connection's just shot.
You're on mycology now.
Yeah, okay, there it is. So a few years back, I was working with the San Diego Mycology Society after I was bringing specimens in for their, what is it, the mushroom fair at Balboa Park. So I did allowed a couple of expeditions where they came out and we collected different species of fungi. So I've been adding species to the list over the last few years, and right now we're up to 65 species. And we're learning a lot about the relationships of some of these species of fungi with the mycelium, with the roots of species of shrubs and the oak trees. So it's important not to disturb too much of the soil, and allowing these populations to grow. Next. So some of the threats. So here you can see the invasive populations that once existed and dominated the open areas within the chaparral and along the road frontage. And with different methods of eradication, volunteer groups helping out, you can see that these sites are now populated with native annual flowering species. It also helps to reduce the spread of fire during fires. These invasive species are known as a flash fuel and help to spread fire quickly through the chaparral. A lot of the native species tend to be fire resistant, low temp fires. And we do get some of the neighboring domestic animals that intrude into the property. Another threat is the development bordering Silverwood in the surrounding area. Everybody is on groundwater out here, so the impact on the water table is pretty severe. And once the water tables drop during the summer, the oak trees can no longer reach the water. Their roots only go down about 35 feet. And this season we lost about 6 old growth oak trees. A lot of them I was able to save by deep soaking around the base of the trunks to keep them hanging on until these recent rains came. So, but it has been a big issue out here. with the die off of the oak trees. So, oh, and then of course the traffic on Wildcat Canyon Road. Over the last few years, a lot of the deer in the area have been hit, the coyotes. During breeding season, the males of the species aren't really thinking too clearly, and they're the ones that get hit the most during breeding season. So next. So Silverwood has many opportunities for education programs. We've been doing education programs for 50 years out here with public schools, homeschool groups, charter school, and many adult groups, retirement groups, garden clubs, everything. So one of the main attractions, of course, is our birding observation area. We have a few bird feeders that attract seed feeding species of birds, and then our hummingbird feeders. So during the spring, we do get a lot of Costa hummingbird, black chin, Allens, and Rufus hummingbirds. Next. So this is the inside of the Frank Gander's Nature Education Center. This education center was funded by a donation from Allstate Insurance after the Cedar Fire. And we went ahead and built this structure, and then began creating unique displays that are specific to Silverwood's habitat. So here you can see a lot of the homeschool and public school groups, and I think there's no college. So next. This is a tracking transect that I created after the Cedar Fire, because Silverwood was shut down for 3 years while we rebuilt the infrastructure, and we weren't doing any education programs. A lot of the schools and other organizations found other outlets like Tecolote Canyon, Mission Trails, Stelter Park, and the Chula Vista Nature Center. And it was hard to attract these classes to come back to Silverwood based on the, like Stelter Park had funding for school buses, so they opted to get a free bus. So I started creating stations that would bring these classes back to Silverwood, and this one was a hit. So this is a tracking station where many of the species of wildlife, from birds, reptiles, mammals, and even insects, are recorded and viewed as an example of what does exist here at Silverwood, even though we don't see them. Next. So this is a unique program that we created, working with Braun Anders, one of the Silverwood committee members. We worked with Jane Dumas and Richard Bugby. They were well-known ethnobotany educators. They actually had a class offered at the Sequan Kumeyaay College. So we worked with them and created what is called the Ethnobotany Trail. It's here at Silverwood that has 20 plant signs with the Kumeyaay, the common and scientific names, and at least up to 4 native uses of each one of those species. And then some of the displays that were created using materials here at Silverwood. So this is a pretty big hit here. So volunteer opportunities. So we do volunteer programs with the invasive weed removal. With the 5.7 miles of trail, we constantly need help maintaining those trails, especially this time of the year with the rains. A lot of our trails are up and down very steep slopes and wash out very easily. So we have engineered erosion control methods using brow ditches and erosion control berms to minimize erosion on the trail. And then we're open on Sundays to the general public from 9 to 4. And we have volunteer hosts that man the parking lot, greeting visitors and having them sign in. And one in the observation area that helped to identify bird species while visitors come in. So here's our trail clearing and erosion control projects. During after the fire, we spent quite a few years rebuilding all the trails with AmeriCorps teams, Boy Scout, Girl Scout troops, and even the California Conservation Corps. Next.
I'm going to give you 1 minute warning, Phil.
Yep. So here you can see we actually manage about 365 acres out of the 785 acres that Silverwood consists of, maintaining invasive species, which is a tremendous amount of work. But we're making headway and recording a lot of these native species coming back and dominating these sites. Next. So here's some images of just some of the volunteer Sunday hosts. And yeah, some of these hosts have actually been hosting out here for up to 30 years. They've been here, coming out here for a long time. So we do appreciate all the help that we get to run these programs and events here at Silverwood. So hope to see you out here on a Sunday. I think that's
Thank you
it,
so much,
right?
Phil.
Thank
So this last slide here just shows how you can connect with San Diego Audubon. So obviously, as Phil said, both our sanctuaries are looking for volunteer work. If you're ever interested in, getting involved at one of our preserves, or just in any of the other
There goes my internet.
organization-wide restoration opportunities that we offer. There's Phil and I's contact information. So myself, Rebekah Angona at San-Diego-Audubon.org, and Phil Lambert. You can always become a friend of San Diego Audubon. And as Jenny had mentioned, there is an opportunity. Obviously, come to our sanctuaries on any of our Saturday or Sundays that we're open to the public, but we are offering a special Anstine tour on Wednesday, November 30th at 8 a.m. That will be with Denise Riddle and Patty Langen, and they will be leading you through the Anstine-Audubon Nature Preserve. So if you haven't been here, it's kind of a unique opportunity. You'll get the place to yourself, and you can go ahead and pre-register for that opportunity as well. And at this point, just a reminder, we're open. Please come and visit us. If there's ever a special event that you want to host here, you know, Phil and I are always open to learn about ways that we can partner with Buena Vista Audubon or any of the other groups that are interested in coming out. And we do offer those periodically throughout the week as well. So at this time, I'll go ahead and turn it back to Joni. And if anybody has any questions, we're here to answer.
Yeah, we had one question for Phil in the chat. He mentioned mixed chaparral, and can he maybe comment on, you know, what is included in that?
Yeah, because Silverwood is in between the coast and the mountains, we get an overlap of montane chaparral species and coastal species. But we also have species that are indigenous just to this zone. You don't find them in the mountains or the coast, like the Lakeside ceanothus. So it's kind of a mixture of mountain species of shrubs and coastal species of shrubs, and then species within just the zone here. So a lot of the coastal species of shrubs are not frost tolerant. So Silverwood does drop. I've recorded temperatures down to 27 degrees here in the winter. So those species like lemonade berry, they just cannot exist out here. And the only places laurel sumacs do survive are within the outcropping boulders, within the habitats where the boulders actually absorb heat during the day and then radiate that heat during the night to reduce frost damage. And on south-facing slopes, they dominate. But on north-facing slopes, especially steep north-facing slopes, you typically don't see laurel sumacs, because they get too much frost damage and then they die. So it's kind of just a transition zone. One of our specimens of big berry manzanita is along what's called the Woodward Trail leading out to the parking lot, is probably the most western specimen recorded. You just don't see them existing any further west than that point. And that's because we are kind of on a south or a north facing general slope. So it's just a very unique area. Once you drive a mile either direction, the habitats completely change. You don't see the density and diversity of the population of shrubs that exist in this canyon type area. And even up on El Capitan Mountain, you know, along the summits out there, you have western azaleas, you have an interior live oak. These are species you see at high elevation areas. And it's just like an island of species that are kind of just stranded in that mountain range.
Okay, thank you.
And we're still recording species. I mean, 56 years and we're not done. We're still not done. I mean, it's just never going to end. So what I did today was I actually printed out the database for the N15 and N14 squares from the Natural History Museum, and I'm going to cross-reference all the species that are on the Silverwood list and determine what species have not been collected yet that I have found and put on the Silverwood list but haven't turned in, and then whatever is on the list within the square and hasn't been recorded at Silverwood will know to be keeping an eye out for those species too. So the one of the species that I recorded this year, the only other one in the whole area of the East County out here, was recorded in 1937 by Frank Gander in an area called the Christian Featherstone Camp east of the Verona Reservation. So he'd been hiking these hillsides back in the 20s recording species. And this is a species I've never seen in my life. I've just never seen it and just happened to stumble upon it while we were out hitting some, invasive sites, isolated areas. And that's how we record this stuff. We're out there doing trail work, we're eradicating invasive populations, and then stumble on a species of plant we don't recognize, and then collect some samples, identify it, and record it. So
Okay,
it's an ongoing, but maybe I should leave some work for the next manager, the next generation. Don't want to do it all.
Michael,
But yeah, this lichen, this Clandonia species, is a soil lichen. That's a pretty exciting find.
Yeah.
I'm pretty excited about recording that.
great. Michael, did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, I was just looking at his slide. Silverwood is open on Sundays. Do they still have the Wednesday? Is it still open Wednesday for members?
Yeah. And I can't man the parking lot all day Wednesday. So 8 o'clock in the morning, we open the gate, we open the register, and we close at 12. So, I know that we get, people that come in off the road once in a while. And members are welcome to bring, friends, groups. So
Great.
it's not too restricted. We actually did have quite a few people out here today. Normally on a Wednesday, we don't get anybody because most members work. But,
Okay. All right, thank you.
Margot,
Yeah.
did you have a question?
Yeah, I have two questions, actually. The first question, I noticed that all of the hiking trails are in like the west section. Is that on purpose to leave the rest of it as a preserve, or what is the reason for that?
yeah. When I started living on the property in 1998, I think, one of the first projects is the manager had me do was scout out a trail called the Silver Dome Trail that led from the circuit trail along the ridge out to the south side of the Silver Dome, up to the peak, and then down the northwest side, back up through what's called Silver Springs. It's a year-round spring at the base of the dome in that riparian forest, and then back up. Now, back in the 80s, there was over 10 miles of trail here at Silverwood. with that Dome Trail and the Silver Springs High Trail. But today, Silverwood doesn't get the volunteers like they did 20, 30 years ago. You had a lot of people that had a lot of free time that would come out and help maintain these trails. So after the Cedar Fire, and there used to be 3 of us living on the property. There were 2 assistants and 1 resident manager. So living on the property, you would just go outside and hike a trail and clear it after you came home from work, because you didn't have a salary. It was a barter deal. You got free rent, and so you still had to go to, we were going to school and working. But after the Cedar Fire, we reduced the existing 7.5 miles of trail because we only rebuilt 1 new residence. So the 2 assistant residents were lost, and then we had to hire a part-time assistant with a full salary. So the time and the man hours that it takes to maintain that many miles of trail weren't sufficient. So we actually reduced the 7.5 down to 5.7 miles of trail. Now, if you start at South Mission Jetty and you start hiking along the coast, the amount of access road and trails that we have to maintain, it's still 7-point-something miles of access road and trails that we maintain. You actually end up at the La Jolla Caves. So you take a pair of pruners and some loppers and you start clearing both sides of the trail from South Mission Jetty all the way to La Jolla Caves. And that's how much work it is. So what we have is manageable right now. And maybe in the future, if Silverwood gets some more part-time staff, we'd be able to maintain that many miles of trail. It's just been hard maintaining dedicated volunteers that are willing to constantly drive out. We're so far out from the city. A lot of the volunteers that we get are from North Park, Ocean Beach, and they just can't afford to come out and help out as often as they wish they could. So we're kind of stuck in a hard place. But with the Climate Corps girls and Sammy and myself, we just finished doing all the erosion control maintenance on all 5.7 miles of trail. So that project's done. We were able to do that. So yeah, and then once the rains start coming again, you start on one side of the property and you start clearing the trails, and by the time you get from the north side to the south side, the north side's already grown in. So it's just back and forth until it starts drying up, and then summertime comes and all the shrubs go to their summer deciduous trait of just kind of dropping leaves and shutting down and not really growing. And then by winter time, it's just like farming. You're doing your seasonal projects.
Well, I did have another question, and that is, I've been to Silverwood, of course, and I don't remember seeing the nature house. Is that something you have to hike to or drive to, or where's the nature house? And has it been
No,
for a long
it's
time?
just, yeah, it's right next to the parking lot. When was the last time you were at Silverwood?
Oh, maybe before COVID, like 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, it's just right there along the Woodward Trail. It's no more than 40 feet from the sign-in register. It's,
Okay, I must have missed it.
yeah, just ask the Sunday host where the education center. Now, we did have it shut down during COVID, and I only recently started reopening it up. So it's, it's open to the public to view the displays. There's a lot of educational stuff that we created from, the energy flow and how fire is a beneficial force within the chaparral and riparian forest to activate new seeds for new generations of species of shrubs, to a lot of geology, local geology displays, and some taxidermy, birds and mammals, insects, a little bit on the flora.
Okay,
Yeah, well, and a little library. It's got an ethnobotany section with a lot of books on ethnobotany and local tribes.
Great. There's a question in the chat I think I'll give to Rebekah from Mary. She says, the safari park has relocated a lot of birds because of the threat of disease. Is the disease threatening our native bird species? And Mary, are you speaking of avian flu?
I'm thinking so.
Hi, no, not necessarily. I don't know what the disease is that's causing the safari park to relocate a lot of the birds. A lot of the birds in the safari park have moved, and they said it's because of the threat of disease. And I don't know what the disease is.
I'm not familiar with the safari park moving the birds. I mean, I have some information about what's going on with the avian flu, but unfortunately, the most recent information that was spread through Audubon, California came on the 4th. So it's been for about 2 weeks. So, I mean, I can speak on that behalf, but I'm unsure of what's happening at the safari park if you're interested in that in particular.
No, I'm interested in knowing if our native birds are being threatened by a disease.
So there is a threat of avian flu going around. As I mentioned, the most recent information I have is from November 4th, where Mike Lyons from Audubon, California was in interview and had suggested on taking down feeders and watering stations and anywhere that multiple birds are congregating. But according to the USDA website, as of that date, it looks like in San Diego County, there was about 100 birds in someone's backyard poultry collection that have been affected as of November 3rd. And so far, there was also a discussion about a black swan from Lake San Marcos, but it wasn't considered a wild bird, so it's not showing up on USDA's list. And as of that date as well, there was no reports for affected wild birds in San Diego yet. Also no reports for wild birds in Imperial County. So I think what the big threat is they're noticing it, there was let me get this, a Canadian goose back in October in LA. Orange County had the most for a white pelican, night heron, Canadian goose, again, back in October. So I think what we're trying to do is be proactive and just say, since it is a disease that can spread so easily, it is being suggested that you'll take down, feeders for a little while or small watering stations, where a mass amount of birds can congregate and potentially spread the disease. We were in discussion the other day with Joni, and she's like, well, what about the Anstine ponds? And it's like, well, that's a larger area. You can't really, you can't really control, or puddles after the rain. But if there is something we can do to kind of move the birds apart from one another, that is what's being suggested and promoted by Audubon, California.
Okay, well, thank you for the information. I'm glad it's not affecting our native species too much.
Again, as I mentioned, the most I have is from the 4th, so hopefully no new records have come my way, but if they have, don't hold that against me. I haven't heard it through the grapevine yet myself.
Yeah, I can comment a little bit more because I volunteer with Project Wildlife. So we've been monitoring the sick birds that have been coming through, and in some cases we have sent them off to, be tested. And most of them have tested negative, but I think there have been a few, and they tend to be things like waterfowl and scavenger species, something that might eat like dead waterfowl, like crows, ravens, hawks, things like that are the most likely birds to succumb to something like that. So I think it's pretty rare that it would happen in songbirds. But I know a lot of folks are taking down their feeders and bird baths temporarily just because they don't want to contribute to the problem, even though it's probably pretty remote that those species would be affected. At least that's what we're seeing so far.
Okay.
Yeah, this
Thank you.
is Howie. Thanks a lot for providing some information on this. So it sounds like we should turn off our bird bath as well. Sounds like that might be a good idea for a little bit.
It's being recommended because, the birds can poop in the bird bath, and if one of them is infected, then another bird comes along and drinks the water, and there we go. Because it can live in water.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for the information. And that was a great presentation. I really enjoyed it. Thank you all.
Yes, thank you. Michael, did you have a final question?
Well, just as a follow-up to the Wild Animal Park, it was about a week and a half ago, the San Diego Union had an article, I think it was the San Diego Union, about a white pelican in one of the enclosures at the Wild Animal Park was tested, and I think they said it had the flu. And so the Wild Animal Park was trying, how do you close up all those exhibit birds and all the exhibits? But they were trying to minimize as much as they could. So it did in fact show up at the Wild Animal Park, according to the San Diego Union and the Wild Animal Park. So it's there, and it was, and I don't know how they deal with it, because that lagoon area they have down there, where the flamingos are, they've got bird baths everywhere. I don't know what they're going to do, but it has shown up there, so they're a little concerned.
Yeah.
Well,
Interesting.
and I'll just add too, I walk at Lakeview Park in San Marcos sometimes, and I just noticed, I think, I can't remember, a couple days ago, I was on a walk there, and for the first time I've noticed they have signs up everywhere, telling people not to feed their water birds, because there's a little lake, and they're, not to feed the birds or go near them or touch them, in an effort to try and stop the spread of avian flu. So
yeah, it's definitely, more likely to occur where there's a large congregation of birds. And that's why, if you have a feeder that's attracting hundreds of birds all at the same time, that's where you run a little more risk.
yeah.
Out in nature, they're visiting flowers and native plants and things, one off here, one off there. It's probably not as much of an issue, but you just try to avoid having a big congregation of birds.
Well, there's a guy named Phil, I think his name is Phil Pride. And he literally will, if you get a hold of him, he will take a dead bird, that if it's fresh, and he'll examine it and tries to determine if it's a victim of the bird flu or what. But he literally, whether it's a songbird or whether it's a waterfowl, but he's part of the San Diego bird group, and he's on there quite a bit, taking in dead birds. Just that's it.
Okay, well, I think we should wrap it up for tonight. I know we went over, and but we had a lot of great information. It was an interesting topic. So thank you, Rebekah and Phil, for sharing with us tonight. And I'm sure some of us will be visiting you in the near future. So thanks again, everybody, for coming, and we hope to see you again soon.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.